Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, and that's Sanford Hess, and this is Rural Reviews Home Edition. But this is a special edition where we talk about our 2020 best and worst. Now, let's be frank, 2020 was a complete and absolute dumpster fire because we didn't get the time at the movies we wanted. Personally, for us here in Champaign, Illinois, we lost incredible staples like the Art Theater, the Savoy 16 shut down, and the AMC 13 is pretty much going into bankruptcy. So it's been a very hard year for movies, which is why we took so much drunken solace in naming our four worst movies of the year and then our five best. So, Sanford, what is your fourth pick for worst movie of the year?
My fourth worst movie of the year is The New Mutants, which we watched in the fall. And something that we agreed on was that this film could have been so much better than it was. It couldn't decide if it was a horror movie or a superhero movie. My main complaint as a fan of the comics was that it didn't even get the characters right. And ultimately, this movie was just a mess of a film and definitely one of the worst movies of 2020.
Okay, my pick for the fourth worst film of 2020 is Vivarium. The movie was just so left of field. You've got this couple that really wants to kind of build a life and build this perfect home, and all of a sudden, a kid shows up that we know is pretty much not human, and you go on this weird odyssey of them trying to escape the house, being underneath the house, watching this kid involve themselves in other people's versions of that same home, and then having the ending be like the biggest complete letdown you could possibly imagine. With spoiler alert, everybody, because I do hate this film, both main characters dying and there being no solace except for the fact that he gets to do it all over again to another couple. And by he, I mean the child, who is a full grown adult by the end of the film. This movie, it's not that it lacked direction, it had direction. It's not direction that went anywhere. And that's why it's my fourth worst movie of the year.
And it doesn't appear on my list, but I'll throw some more on the fire on that one also because it was, they're trapped inside the house and it's just it's an eerie perspective on the pandemic because they couldn't leave their house and
Yeah,
we all feel that way.
so.
All right. My
Your third?
third worst movie of the year wasn't actually a movie from 2020, but it's one we watched in 2020.
What
And
you
it
got?
is I, Daniel Blake.
Oh, okay. That's a fair hit.
I really could not connect with this movie. The only thing that I liked in this movie was the opening scene during the credits when there was a conversation on the phone with a black screen. Once people started appearing on the screen, I did not enjoy this movie. This slice of life filmed in Newcastle or set in Newcastle, England, was showing us how difficult life can be for somebody who is a laborer who cannot quite work but also cannot collect unemployment insurance. It was a depressing, drawn out movie that just led on a bleak charge to nowhere and kind of like 2020. So I did not enjoy Daniel Blake. GK, what was your third worst movie of the year?
My third worst movie was The Hunt. As much as I like the satirical nature of them commenting on Republicans and Democrats, the out and out cotton candy like violence that was constantly displayed with no real hope and visage of any kind of happier future just eventually felt bland to me and useless. I was happy to watch it in 2020, but it just, when you think on it, when you get perspective on it, it's just an unfunny, ununique mess that plays on tropes from the Hunger Games. And you have Hilary Swank, an Oscar winning actress, who is the lead villain of this movie, and you only see her in the final 20 minutes in the first five. Like, What are you doing? What are you trying to say about how disconnected society is? I don't get it. Where this movie had no joy. It was joyless. And that's why it's my number three. What's your number two?
My number two worst movie of the year is Wonder Woman 1984. Now, we made the mistake of watching this right after watching the original Wonder Woman, which is an infinitely better movie on every level than Wonder Woman 1984. Wonder
Agreed.
Woman 1984 went on too long, didn't make as much sense. I enjoyed the dynamic between Wonder Woman and Chris Pine. But really, that was about the only saving grace of that 2.5 hour dumpster fire that we'll call Wonder Woman 1984.
I agree with you on so many levels. Having thought about that movie afterwards, like I said, the joy of that movie is in the first 20 minutes and then it's gone.
Yeah.
My number two is a movie we have not watched together, although I really hope we do at some point, just because I don't understand why anybody who had creative power thought that this was going to be an interesting movie. It's Ammonite, the Kate Winslet, Saoirse Ronan love story involving paleontology. For those who are uninitiated, this was supposed to be the big breakout movie where Saoirse Ronan and Kate Winslet were in a huge lesbian drama. I sat through that movie and I wondered, how am I supposed to care about these people when they do nothing to really connect to each other? You can see every plot thread coming from a mile away, and you don't root for them to succeed. It's impossible to root for them to succeed because you don't know enough about the younger of the two leads. So, with that said, Sanford, I'm very curious what your number one is.
The worst movie that I saw this year was on assignment for Real Reviews, Artemis Fowl. And
Oh.
foul is how I think this movie should be rated. Uh, I never read the book, so I didn't have sort of a touchstone for judging the movie. But as a movie, this thing was just, it couldn't decide where it was going. The characters were one dimensional. I couldn't really get into anything. Probably the most interesting character was the one who eats dirt and poops it out. I mean, that says legions about this movie itself. I wasn't into the storyline. The fantasy side didn't excite me. There was just nothing in Artemis Fowl that I found appealing.
I'm so glad we didn't review this because I was a huge fan of the book series and I watched that separate from you, and I freaking hate this movie. It should be my number one, but it's not. Something hurt me worse than that, which is a surprise because the child actor in Artemis Fowl was so weak in terms of emotional thought process. He always had the same expression for everything. That may not be the fault of the actor, that may be the fault of the people directing him. Artemis Fowl is supposed to be a smart, confident, rich kid who has a plan for freaking everything, even when he doesn't. Butler is supposed to be this non-stoic, but very brutish actioneer kind of character who protects Artemis at all costs. None of that was on display in that movie. You didn't get any of the relationships, any of the connections, and you didn't care about whether his dad was going to make it out alive or not. The books do a much better job at that, and it's a shame that Disney failed on such a colossal level. Having said that, my number one film is also a Disney property. If you count the underserved company that has now been rolled into it, basically was forced to push this movie out at the last minute, and it shows. My number one worst movie of 2020 is X-Men New Mutants. There's so much. There's so much to hate about this movie. You give us a Native American character and you don't even spend time with that character's culture. You don't spend time establishing her love of or care of the spiritual. You give us a romance between that character and Wolfsbane, I think is the character's name, and you barely spend 5 seconds on flashbacks to whatever Wolfsbane's trauma supposedly is. What are you doing? I mean, listen, the director on this got screwed. He had the opportunity to make a brilliant franchise. The upper level people at the company would not let him do that the way he sought to originally plan to do that. And he got screwed. So even though it's my worst movie of the year, I don't hold the director at fault, which is very, very rare. Because even though he was given great characters to work with, the structure on which he was trying to build that based on the company's demands was never going to hold solid.
Yeah, anytime you've got a movie that's in the can for 2 years and goes through massive rewrites, it's just a signal that something's wrong.
I agree completely. Now I want to switch gears to.
Yeah, really.
Because I feel better now.
Much like ending 2020, let's leave the bad behind.
And let's go to the good. So, top 5 best movies of the year.
So my number 5 was a surprise to me. It was another assignment for Real Reviews that I went into thinking, oh, I got to watch some Christmas movie with LGBT themes. But Happiest Season wound up to be a real surprise for me. It was a much better movie than I expected. It was kind of a rote movie. It hit all the themes of a Christmas movie, but it did them in a way that felt fresh. It had excellent performances. It had a great script. It moved along at a brisk pace. I didn't feel like there were a lot of wasted scenes or wasted moments, and I enjoyed myself. And at the end of the movie, even a Scrooge like me had a little bit of the Christmas spirit in him. But more importantly, I just felt like I had seen a really good movie. And so Happiest Season makes my top 5.
Well, ironically, this might be the one time where you and I actually match. My number 5 is also Happiest Season. I don't know whether it's the way the characters were built, the friendships between the characters that weren't in a relationship, or the dynamics with the parents trying to understand their child and the child trying to hide it. We all have things we hide from our parents. They're just not on this scale. And Clea Duvall did such a fantastic job at narrowing it down to a point where we not only sympathize with both characters, but we also kind of not understand the prejudices, but appreciate the fact that that exists in our society. Almost in a way, in a very Christmassy way, showing that everyone is deserving of love and care no matter what their orientation or affiliation is. And I think that's such a beautiful sentiment for 2020, especially towards its end.
Right. To me, it speaks to the power of film. I mean, very few modes of an entertainment can place you into the world of somebody else like film. And the power of this movie to make, a straight white male like me appreciate and understand what's going on in these characters' heads. That's what great film was about. And, and feeling that kind of the world of somebody else is what movies can do because of the way that they can blend visual, sound, words, meaning, emotion. They can bring it all together in a way that other forms of entertainment just can't do.
So,
yes.
What's your number 4?
So my number 4 was the movie Tenet, which we did not watch for Real Reviews, and mainly because it was one of the few movies that actually had a theatrical release, and so was not available for home viewing until very recently.
Right.
I enjoyed Tenet as a big budget action movie with a brain. Now, in pondering the movie after I watched, did you see Tenet?
I did not. I still haven't yet.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say too much, but in pondering the movie after I saw it, and I thought about it for hours. The movie, it's trying to really land a very difficult idea And I don't want to give too much away, both for your enjoyment and then just for the viewing audience. But it involves, and really much of the movie is one of those you're watching the protagonist react to situations.
Mhm.
And John David Washington, am I getting his name right? Yeah,
Yeah.
is really fabulous in portraying just with his face and his reactions what his thought process is. So there's a very strong lead performance. Then you get into all the really cool special effects. And this movie is a filmmaker's movie. I mean, Christopher Nolan, we watched the Dark Knight trilogy this year. You know, we know his ability to make really cool movies. This movie has some amazing set pieces, and I think more impressively, does a great job. It's not just explosions and stuff for no purpose. There's a plot here, and the set pieces really work towards advancing the plot. So I really enjoyed Tenet, and it had me thinking for hours. And after you watch it, we're going to have some fun talking about it.
Sounds good to me. My number four is a movie that we have also not reviewed, though I'm heavily thinking about us reviewing it. It's Disney Pixar's Soul. The latest Disney Pixar effort, Soul, may be its best because it comes from one of its best minds, director Pete Docter, who also directed Inside Out. Directed this movie about a man, Joe Gardner, who is a middle school music teacher who very much wants to be a full time jazz musician, and he gets the opportunity to do so with jazz saxophonist Dorothea Williams. He nails his audition, and then, as he's excitedly talking about it, falls into a manhole and passes away. His soul goes to the great beyond, but he's trying not to go there because he doesn't want to die. He's just about to get to his main chance to, be successful, and he falls to the great before, which is where all souls begin. He's tasked with mentoring and training a lost soul named 22 who feels like she has no purpose and has no desire to go to Earth. And the whole movie progresses with them learning about what it really means to have a soul, what it means to be a part of something. I love the film for that reason. Jamie Foxx gives one of his best performances since 2005's Ray. Tina Fey is predictably funny and very earnest in her role as 22. And it's a movie that I think a lot of families and just individuals can enjoy. And it's one of Disney's best efforts. What's your number three?
So my number three, I remembered when I went back to some of the films that we reviewed starting from the beginning of the year. It was actually a pre-pandemic movie.
Okay.
Dolomite is my name. So
Oh, interesting.
Dolomite, it's this is a based on true event story starring Eddie Murphy and really an amazing cast around him. Dolomite, is there was a movie from the 70s, and sort of a Dolomite was a character created by Rudy Ray Moore and was the movie tells us the story of its creation, tells us the story of filming the movie, but more importantly, gives us a real human character that is wonderfully played by Eddie Murphy. And I thought, in thinking back on this film and watching, some of our review of it, we were both really transfixed by his performance. It's a strong human performance. It's funny. He's deep. He's got everything going for him, and he's surrounded by a great cast of people and having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed watching us talk about Dolomite, and I remember how much I enjoy watching the movie. So that is my number three movie of the year.
My number three movie of the year. Oh, so hard to make this choice. I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna do it. My number three of the year is another movie that we have not had a chance to review. But it is the, ironically the Five Bloods, the Spike Lee directed Vietnam War picture starring Chadwick Boseman and many others. And it's just a great look at the black experience through the lens of the Vietnam War. I love everything about how it's shot. They make it have a really retro feel, so it feels like the characters who are experiencing the war were there, and it has a lot to say about how we view each other, whether that be being a hardcore conservative who's also a Vietnam vet, or being someone who's on the opposite side. And I think there's so much to learn from Spike Lee's tale of the Five Bloods that we should probably explore in a future review.
I think I can see a double feature with Soul coming up.
Well, that would be a good idea.
I haven't
Let's
seen
get
either of
on
them,
that.
so I'm excited. I love, hey, if you're telling me they're good, I'm all in. So my number 2 movie of the year is another recommendation from Chike. This is the documentary Rising Phoenix.
Oh,
We watched soon after it came out. This documentary is about the paraplegic. I'm sorry, the Paralympics. Sorry, which is not about the paraplegics. It's about the parallel Olympics. We learned that in the movie. Rising Phoenix does a wonderful job telling the story of these Paralympians by focusing on a small number of them. We get to know them. We learn about their ups and downs. We see them in competition. Here's a spoiler alert: some are successful, some are not. But it is a wonderful sports movie because sports really brings out this side of us, this competitive side, and ultimately either, and to be a cliche about it, either the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. And we see both of them in this film. But more importantly, we get a window into the athletes' souls of how they prepare and why they prepare and what drives them. And I just found Rising Phoenix also to be a fantastically shot and beautiful movie, in addition to an incredibly moving one.
my number 2, it is something that betrays my very soul. It betrays me entirely. But it's something that I love deep in my heart, where if I think about watching it for 5 seconds, I'm going to smile because it's just that it's not even that it's a great film. It just makes me feel good. And that's Bill and Ted Face the Music. Oh, I started watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure like in 1990, and then I eventually saw Bogus Journey and thought that that was weird and wacky, but I didn't hate it. But something about Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves coming together to play these characters again 30 odd years later from when they first did, and the energy being there and the story really being there, and the consequences of their failure really being there, and how it's not that they failed to support each other, it's that they fail to really realize what their true life's purpose is. Another soul callback there. And when they finally find it, when they finally find their role, that whole movie oddly is magic. And you don't expect it at all. It's just amazing that they're able to make that fun and interesting and playful. I'll point to the scene that I really love most when they're going to visit like Mozart, and I think it was Louis Armstrong or Jimi Hendrix into playing the classical notes to lure Mozart out. There's nothing sweeter than that. It's just the weirdest thing. You never expect that to happen, but it does, and it, it fills me with joy. That's my number 2. What's yours?
My number 1 movie is
Oh,
Bill
you're
and
number
Ted
one.
Face the Music. So I'm right there with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to echo everything you said about this. I love the way that they called back to how they handled the first movie. I love that they go through and get these great musicians. But, I'm just going to echo all you said and say also that I think this is an incredible movie with statements about aging and middle life phase of your existence. And watching Bill and Ted go through this phase where they're not living up to what they thought they would be doing at 18, and even were told they were going to be doing at 18,
Right.
and watching them deal with this phase of their life, I really could connect to that as a middle-aged guy. But I just found the humor of this movie overwhelming. I thought that it was such a great script. They did an excellent job returning. It's hard to return to characters after 20 years and do an effective movie. Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
But they did an outstanding job. And I really also enjoyed all the alternate Bill and Ted realities that they interacted with,
Oh,
including the ones that were in prison and super roided up, or the ones who were just flat out evil.
the ones that are flat out evil, faking they're British.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this movie on so many levels. So Chike, over to you. What was the best movie of 2020?
My best movie of 2020. Oh, I have to do this, and I'm breaking all convention. There are two best movies of 2020.
Oh, cheater.
Both. Um, my first best movie of 2020 was the last movie I saw before the pandemic hit, and I saw it with some very special people that I wish I could shout out, but I can't. Um, I saw The Invisible Man in March of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. That movie is spectacular on so many levels with what they do with suspense, with what they do with sound, with what they do with your vision. Everything is immaculately shot. You never know what's coming around the corner. You never know how they're going to solve who this invisible person is or what they're doing. You're with the protagonist who's not the invisible man, but the person being tormented by them. It's an amazing idea that nobody really came up with until now. I mean, Hollow Man even followed the invisible man first before switching the point of view to the girl he was distressing. But this one starts from the female's perspective. And it's so amazing. Elizabeth Moss gives the performance of her life. And I love her in so many different things, but this is definitively her best work.
Yeah,
Now,
I watched that movie recently and I really liked it too. I mean, I just thought from the opening shot, that movie dragged me in. Watching her run, sort of jump out of bed and run out. It was just that movie had me going for the whole time. So, okay, what ties with The Invisible Man in your mind?
a movie you haven't seen, starring an actor that nobody likes right now, but with an important piece of subject matter that needs to be discussed more in our culture, and that would be Pieces of a Woman. This is the film starring Shia LaBeouf and Vanessa Kirby, involving a woman who deals with a difficult home birth and the after effects of that difficult and no spoilers here, but tragic end. We follow them over the course of an entire year as they try to make sense of their lives and lay blame where it's supposed to go. Vanessa Kirby, there's no question in my mind, gives an Oscar winning performance in this role, mostly because of everything that she doesn't say and everything that just shows on her face and her body language. And Shia LaBeouf, even though he's under controversy right now for sexual abuse claims or whatever the case may be, abuse of a partner, gives the most grounded, realistic portrayal of a broken man fighting for his way up. And also, I would be criminal if I did not mention Ellen Burstyn as Vanessa Kirby's mother in this film, who is trying to shoehorn her daughter into making a decision about what happened that fateful night and how that affects not only Marcia, Vanessa Kirby's character, and her mother, but the whole extended family at large. It's a very powerful film. I saw it at the Toronto Film Festival this year in September before it debuted on Netflix this very month. It's a piece of art, but also a piece of tragedy. And when those two things come together, it's movie magic because it makes us think about our lives and what we really value. So that is my top five and your top five and our top four worst movies. We will see you next week on another episode of Real Reviews Home Edition. And next week, I think we've got a lot to talk about, but that's where I'm going to leave it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.